Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Ask Kate. So today we're going to talk about, because we've had a lot of clients ask us recently about fermented foods, probiotics, prebiotics. And this was something that I used to be right into as well. I'm not sure if you ever got into it.
I definitely got into the probiotics.
Yeah.
Never really got into the fermented foods. I feel like that's been resurrected in the last 7 or 8 years, or maybe a little bit longer in the yoga community. They've been doing all that kombucha and so forth. But I didn't ever like the taste of it.
Mm.
It was like drinking a lactic acid drink, and I didn't like drinking it or any of those things. So for me, that wasn't ever a big hit, but definitely taking probiotics, I definitely did that. Never noticed any sort of change ever. It was one of the many supplements I took, and I was like, I have no idea if this is doing anything for me. And at those times I probably had a lot of different digestive issues, obviously, because I was eating a lot of hard to digest foods. And so you eat a lot of these probiotics or eating things you think are going to help your gut as they're sold to you. And, my question always is there science behind that? And do they really help? Have you talked to, everyone I've talked to, I've never talked to one person that thinks those things have helped them in the digestive area. So I guess that's kind of where we should go with this conversation.
Well, do you want to talk about, should we start with the fermented foods? And like my understanding of fermented foods is traditionally they were like condiments, like there's little side dishes that you have with a meal. So you'd have a small amount and they're really well cooked. But all of a sudden people are starting to think that they need to eat like them as a help. It's like I think people think something that's you have a little bit of that's good for you, we should eat a shitload of it, or like curries, like you'd have a curry with a bit of yogurt on the side, or like German. I think sauerkraut's German. Is it German?
I think
Is it German?
they eat it in Germany.
Yeah.
I don't know where it originally comes from. It might be from Asian communities. I don't know. Kombucha is from kimchi, South Korea. Definitely the Asian communities eat a lot of fermented foods. From my understanding, it was just a way to preserve food. That's why we fermented, because it was a way you could keep food fresher longer. And, and then refrigeration came along and we didn't have to do that as much because now we had refrigeration. But it's recently come back into vogue. People are like, hey, I think that this helps with my gut and it gives me good gut bacteria and it helps with digestion and immune function. And that's kind of how it's sold. If you go on any websites that are out there, that's probably what they're going to say, this is why you should have fermented foods back into your diet. But yeah, a lot of them are condiments, but people are eating, large amounts of kombucha and kimchi or kefir. It seems like this has become a big part of a lot of people's diets, trying to promote a better gut health. And I'm not sure that that's really what is happening. To be honest, there's really no science, or at least that I've seen, that's showing that fermented foods are improving gut health. And if you kind of look into the history of the communities that ferment food the most, like China and South Korea, they also have the highest levels of stomach and throat cancer. So they think there could be some affiliation by these highly fermented foods, because a lot of them, they're more prone to mold in the fermentation process if they're exposed to air. So having these foods sit out, you can have the mold, and they think that can be causing some of these cancers. They're obviously, we don't know if that's conclusive, but that is shown. And, and obviously if you ferment the foods properly, I guess, because when you ferment them, they do need to be submerged. It is like an anaerobic environment. So you want to submerge them liquid to create that fermentation process. A lot of times though, they are not, and that's when the mold will grow. But if you ferment them properly, keep them constantly submerged, I guess on some level that might not happen. But I'm going to guess when they're produced in these large quantities, the chances of that not happening are probably slim to none, probably of getting some sort of mold level into the fermentation.
And what about like the probiotics, prebiotics? Like I'll get heaps of questions about them as well.
I think it's the same thing with those. I remember listening to an interview, I think with Danny Roddy and Hayden, and he was talking about how there's no science showing that these probiotics even get deep into the colon. So they don't even reach the area where the bacteria should be unless they're, medically leveled or pharmaceutical level probiotics. But I mean, the point being is they're supposed to create this good bacteria, but most of them have the lactobacillus in it. And so what we do know is people that have high levels of lactobacillus in their gut also have a higher propensity to things like lupus, MS, autoimmune issues. So is that really something that we're trying to do or want to do? And, and also we know that, the lactic acid that these fermented foods produce, or the lactobacillus, is also taxing on our liver function, because for us to utilize that lactic acid as energy, it needs to be converted back to glucose, and that takes an enormous amount of energy to do so. So it takes more energy to convert it than to actually get the energy out of it that we need. So it's a drain on someone's system that is in a sick place. If you're already compromised, then adding a lot of fermented foods would be the last thing you need to be doing for yourself.
So I think, probably if people have digestive issues, let's talk about, instead of trying to eat these probiotics and fermented foods, what are some things that they could do to try and actually improve that?
Well, I mean, at first I would say remove the things that might be causing you distress. And we've always talked about this. So when you're in the compromised state, you're not going to digest foods very well. And foods are going to be like your leafy green vegetables or raw vegetables, your nuts, seeds, legumes, anything that's going to be hard to break down for your system to break down, you need to avoid, because that's going to create more bacterial overgrowth issues. Because the longer something takes to get through your system, the more chance it has to create bacteria around it. And that's why having a good bowel and having, things move through you quicker, not like diarrhea quicker, but going to the bathroom regularly is healthy for your system, because once it gets through you, there's no need for it. You just want to eliminate it. So having, when you're constipated, then that's going to produce more bacterial overgrowth. And so then eating a bunch of high fibrous, hard to digest food on top of that is just going to create more issues. And then eating a bunch of probiotics and pills that we don't even know if we're getting to the right place, stacking that on top of that is only going to create more issues. So again, the first thing you probably need to do is remove all the foods that could be causing you distress, and then start supporting it with foods that will start creating movement. And of course, the raw carrot salad with some coconut oil is supportive to that, with a little vinegar. Then also eating foods that are going to be easier to digest. Fruits, cooked fruits, bone broth is good to add into this. Honey's been shown as a good food to add to the gut function. Dairy products, as long as you can digest them. If you have some gut issues or small intestine issues, they might not be ideal initially. You might want to use something like a cheese that has low cultures, or usually something like a Parmesan cheese or ricotta that doesn't use a lot of enzymes or cultures to create it. And then eat small meals frequently through the day, with an abundance of easy to digest sugars. And like I said, with fruits, and then also with juices is also another good one, because it's not hard for your body to process.
Yeah, it's interesting, like every day, because we work with so many women and I see it every day, they start to poo more regularly. The bloating goes away. They're like, fuck, this is amazing, Kitty. I think because I was the same too. I used to just eat these green vegetables and they would make me so gassy and bloated and constipated, but I just always forced them in because I thought, they're really good for me. Like the fitness industry tells me that they're good for me, but I wasn't actually listening to my body. And I think too, like if you've done it for years and years, when your metabolism slows down and thyroid function slows down, like when your body slows everything down, including peristalsis of the intestines, it takes time to improve that. And it's like a systemic type thing, I guess, like your metabolism, once it gets better and you can eat more food and your temp and pulse comes up, I find that people will also start to poo more regularly. But like you said, do the carrot salad, the cooked mushrooms are another really good one. Bamboo shoots, we sometimes recommend people, if they're really struggling, they're doing all the right things, get the bamboo shoots, cook them for 10 minutes, like blend them up, have a couple of tablespoons between meals, and that seems to sort of help get things going as well. But starches too are another one I find. Like a lot of women will go in our program really heavy on the starches, and even though sourdough bread's delicious and potatoes and rice, they're all delicious, it's like try and balance it out. you know, don't just eat all starches, have a balance of fruits and juices and simple sugars as well. And I think sometimes, you know, you may have to reduce the starches considerably initially, and then you can, once things improve, start to add them back in again, and, you know, you should be fine. And I think nothing's forever, you know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, everyone could be a little bit different as what they can tolerate and what they can handle. I mean, you know, you have your gut, you have your small intestine, you have your colon. If any of those things are being affected, you kind of have to address them, you know, and your nutrients get absorbed through your small intestine. So if that's inflamed and that's got bacterial coming up through that, which it shouldn't be there, then you're going to have issues, and you kind of have to address that. So because you could be eating a ton of food, and if your intestines or your small intestine isn't able to absorb any of that, then you're basically going to be nutrient deficient, even though you're eating tons of food. So all these things have to be addressed. And that's why some people can eat and they go, I'm never feeling satisfied, or I'm not feeling better. But I'm like, well, how's the health of your gut and your intestinal areas? And if those are not in good health, and you're just eating things that are creating more disturbances, then you're not going to get anywhere, even with the best quality of food. So those things definitely need to be addressed. And, you know, and if you read any of Ray's research, I mean, he will definitely tell you that having a sterile gut is the way to go. And that's why he will sometimes advocate things like antibiotics. And I'm not advocating those, but there are some positive things for taking an antibiotic, because it will kill a lot of the gut bacteria that might be coming through your small intestinal area. But as you said, the raw carrot salad can serve as a natural antibiotic, and that can be supportive. So can things like mushrooms and bamboo shoots. All of those things can help, using coconut oil to help cleanse that area out and be supportive.
I think too, like I've noticed with clients and even myself and Craig, is stress. You know, things might be going really good for a while, and then all of a sudden they hit this point and they get super stressed. They're like, oh geez, I'm constipated. You know, I think stress can really and we've talked about stress before, and looking at the, you know, everything as a whole, not just going, oh, I'm doing all the right things with the food, but my stress is really high. So can you talk a bit about that and how that can affect?
Well, I think stress can affect everything. You know, I mean, when your stress hormones rise, I mean, and it depending on where you're at, because sometimes you have increased serotonin under times of stress, and serotonin is going to increase your intestinal motility. So that's when you usually have things like diarrhea. So it's going to act, that's one of the positive things, I guess, serotonin does, is it can help increase things getting out of you. But then again, if it's chronic, then that's going to also be a bad thing, because you don't want to, if you have things moving out of you too quickly, you're not able to absorb any of the nutrition. You know, people that ever have like yellow or white feces, or, you know, then they can see that their body is not being utilized properly, because the bile is not even getting to their system.